It started with the quiet hum of the dishwasher and the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. The kind of suburban silence that feels earned after a long workday. Paperwork filed, clients placated, one glass of bourbon poured. I remember thinking, this is what stability sounds like. The low mechanical drone of a machine doing its job better than most people do theirs. Then her phone lit up. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Jenna had left it on the counter beside the fruit bowl, screen faced up. The name on it was so bold, so plain, that my first reaction wasn't anger. It was curiosity. Andrew Hale. The man whose name had been floating around our dinner conversations for months like a minor celebrity cameo. Her boss, the visionary, the genius under pressure. The phone buzzed once, then again. I watched it, pretending not to. I even took a sip of bourbon to look casual, though my hand tightened around the glass. Jenna walked in from the living room wearing her home office face. Tight smile, restless eyes. "Work thing," she said before I asked. "He's dealing with the West Coast account mess. I just need to jump on a quick call." I nodded, because that's what the husband of a rising PR manager is supposed to do. Support. Understand. Pretend it's fine when your wife is whispering into her phone in another room at nearly 11 at night. She disappeared into the study, closing the door behind her. I tried to focus on the bourbon, on the muted TV showing some cooking show rerun. But her laugh carried through the wall, light, melodic, private, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard in months. 10 minutes later, she reappeared, cheeks faintly flushed, phone clutched tight. "Sorry," she said. "He's stressing again. You know how it is." I smiled politely. "Sure. He must be lucky to have such a patient team." She gave me a distracted peck on the cheek and headed upstairs. I sat there for another half hour, watching the condensation gather on my glass, listening to the house settle. Then I checked the time. 10:47 p.m. A number that would, for some reason, lodge itself in my mind like a bookmark for everything that came after. The next morning started like any other. 2 coffees, her light breakfast, my heavier one. She was on her phone, multitasking through texts and emails, smiling at the screen like it was telling her a secret. "You're glowing," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Big presentation next week," she said, without looking up. "Andrew wants me to lead it." "Andrew wants a lot of things," I said lightly, and she looked up, puzzled, like she'd missed the joke. Maybe she had. We exchanged the kind of kiss you give out of habit, not affection, and she was gone, heels clicking down the driveway, car engine purring to life. The house went silent again. For a long moment I stood by the window, watching her taillights vanish. Something in me tightened. Not anger, not jealousy. Calculation. The kind of mental pivot I make in court when someone says something that doesn't fit the story. By evening, the calm mask had returned. She came home cheerful, humming to herself. I asked about her day. She talked about strategy meetings and media angles, all the right corporate words for an affair in progress. After dinner, she took her laptop upstairs to catch up on emails. I stayed behind, clearing dishes, my mind clicking into gears I didn't know I had. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was evidence gathering. The first piece came easily. While tidying up the kitchen, I found a receipt near the toaster, slipped from her purse maybe. A hotel in Providence, booked under J. Cross, with a second guest listed as A. Hale. My pulse stayed steady. That was the funny part. I didn't feel like a man betrayed. I felt like a lawyer in discovery mode. I took a photo of it, folded it neatly, and placed it back where I found it. 2 days later, Jenna mentioned she'd have to travel again. "Conference thing," she said, waving her fork casually over breakfast. "You know how boring those are." "Sure," I said. "You'll be with the team?" "Yeah, Same group. Andrew, couple of others. I sipped my coffee, watching the steam rise. Sounds productive. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile you give when you think you're smarter than the person across from you. That night I called Paul Monroe. Paul's an ex-cop who went private after deciding courtrooms paid better than precincts. He's gruff, efficient, and allergic to pleasantries. "Long time, counselor," he said when he picked up. "You finally need my kind of help?" "Strictly professional," I said. "A client issue." He laughed once, low. "Sure. Give me a name." "Andrew Hale," I said, "CEO of Grayline PR. My client suspects irregularities in company expenses, maybe personal use of funds." "Your client being?" "Hypothetically, a man with a mortgage and a growing sense of irony." Paul chuckled. "Understood. I'll keep it quiet. You'll get my report in a week." That week crawled by. Jenna grew more confident, like she'd crossed some invisible threshold where guilt no longer applied. She dressed sharper, lingered on her phone, checked her reflection more often. On Thursday, she left early for a regional meetup. Her suitcase looked too new, too carefully packed. I watched from the porch as she loaded it into her car, waving casually. I waved back. An hour later, Paul called. "She's at the Harbor View," he said. "Suite 908. Checked in under her name. Hale arrived an hour later." I didn't say a word. "You want me to keep eyes?" "No," I said. "That's enough." "Thought so. You don't sound surprised." "I'm not," I said, just confirming a theory. That night, the house felt larger than usual. I poured another bourbon, walked from room to room like an inspector at a crime scene. Every photo on the wall, every joint possession looked suddenly artificial, props in a play I hadn't realized I was acting in. The funny thing about betrayal is how organized it makes your thoughts. There's no chaos, no shouting, just clarity. I opened my laptop, pulled up a blank document, and began typing notes. Not emotional ones, legal. Timeline, witnesses, financial inconsistencies, digital traces. If you're going to lose something, at least make sure it's itemized. Jenna came home Sunday evening, sunburned and smiling. "You should have seen the view," she said. "Ocean right outside the room." "Providence?" I asked casually. She froze for half a second, then laughed. "Yeah, conference center had ocean access." "Nice," I said, keeping my tone smooth. "You bring me a souvenir?" She rolled her eyes. "It's not that kind of trip." "Right," I said. "Strictly business." Her smile faltered, just briefly. "You're acting weird." "Am I? Must be all the bourbon." She shrugged it off, heading upstairs. I watched her go, wondering how long people can balance a lie before it starts tipping. On Monday morning, she left early again. The moment her car disappeared, I called Paul. "Need another favor," I said. He grunted. "Surveillance?" "No, I want paper trails, expenses, travel logs, reimbursements. I'll handle the rest." "You planning to go nuclear?" "Something like that." He gave a low whistle. "All right, counselor. You're the client." 3 days later, Paul handed me a small folder over lunch. Inside, photos, receipts, and one particularly incriminating company memo. Grayline PR had billed a strategic retreat to a client's account, with Jenna listed as executive coordinator. The retreat was the same weekend as her so-called conference. "You sure you want to use this?" Paul asked. "Could get messy." "Messy," I said, "is when people lie badly." He laughed. "You always had a dark sense of humor." Occupational hazard. I slipped the folder into my briefcase and finished my coffee. That night, Jenna was home before me. She'd cooked pasta, lit candles, opened wine. Guilt dinner, my mind labeled it instantly. "Thought we could use a nice night," she said brightly. "You've been distant lately." "Work," I said. "You know how it is." We ate in near silence, the clink of silverware filling the gaps. She kept glancing at me, searching for reassurance, maybe wondering if I'd found something. After dinner, She leaned on the counter, sipping wine. "We should take a trip," she said suddenly. "Just us." "Providence?" I asked, smiling faintly. She froze again, then forced a laugh. "Somewhere nicer. You're joking, right?" "Of course," I said, smiling wider. But in that moment, something in her expression flickered. She saw it. The shift. The way my jokes had become sharper, my calm a little too steady. Maybe she sensed the ground shifting beneath her, even if she didn't know why. She set down her glass and left the room without another word. I stayed behind, watching the candlelight dance across the table. The air smelled faintly of tomato sauce and tension. It struck me how strange it was, the things that survive betrayal, the routines, the objects, the shared spaces. Even as trust erodes, you still argue over dishes, still fold the same laundry, still ask about each other's day, but beneath it, something starts humming. A current of quiet intent. By the time I went upstairs, she was asleep, or pretending to be. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her breathing. Then I turned, went into my office, and unlocked the drawer with Paul's folder. The hotel receipt, the expense memo, the photos, all laid out neatly, like exhibits in a trial. I didn't feel rage, just precision. I drafted a note on my legal pad. "Invite your boss, and I'm done." I underlined it twice. Not a threat, a statement of fact. Because when the truth finally arrives, it doesn't need to shout. It just needs a microphone, and I was ready to hand her one. By morning, I had a plan, which is my version of prayer. Plans don't ask for mercy. They build scaffolding around chaos and tell it to wait its turn. I'm a corporate attorney, which is a fancy way of saying I spend my days teaching people how to be honest enough on paper to survive the next audit. I know where numbers like to hide, how words slip through gaps, and the exact tone of voice a liar uses when they call it just a misunderstanding. Jenna poured coffee like she was auditioning for Wholesome Spouse of the Year. Her phone was face down. That's modern trust. Face down means privacy, face up means confidence, and turned off means we're in a fight. I took my mug and studied her the way a juror studies a witness, openly curious, pretending not to judge. "We need groceries," she said, scrolling with her thumb. "I'll stop by after work. Do you want that brand of oat cereal you pretend to hate?" "Pretend is such a strong word," I said. "But yes." She smiled thinly at the counter. "I have a client roundtable tonight. Don't wait up." "Roundtable," I said. "As an actual table or a group chat with nicer snacks?" She looked up. "Andrew wants FaceTime before the presentation next week." Andrew does strike me as a FaceTime guy. "Daniel," she said softly, warning tucked inside my name. "What?" "I'm agreeing with you." She slipped her phone into her bag. "You've been different." "I'm the same," I said. "Maybe more observant." She studied me for a beat, then kissed my cheek and left. The door clicked shut with a quiet finality. In the driveway, her car backed into the street like a confident lie. Smooth, practice honed, expected to pass. I took my coffee into the study and opened my laptop. Email, calendar, case notes, the familiar frameworks. I wish I could tell you I hesitated. I didn't. Hesitation is for people who trust their luck. I trust ink and timestamps. First, I made a list, just like we do when a client says, "We're fine," which is code for, "We tripped over our own policy and don't want to admit it." 1. Jenna's official travel dates, past 6 months. 2. Gray Line PRs build client events on those dates. 3. Any overlap between events and resorts with spa packages labeled business wellness. 4. Andrew's public schedule, which, like most executives, he treated as a brand more than a calendar. People imagine some hacker montage when you say, investigation. They picture green code raining from the sky. The real thing is search fields, invoices, and document naming conventions that accidentally confess things their authors never intended. I started benign. Company press releases, event photos, Internal memos Jenna had shown me over dinner in the good years. PR culture loves documentation because it loves a narrative it can control. But it also loves reimbursement, and reimbursement creates receipts, and receipts are where the story goes to sleep under its real name. Before lunch, Paul messaged from a number that always looks temporary. Pulled corporate card summaries. Nothing illegal to my eye, but shady. You want safe or thorough? Thorough, I typed, but we keep it clean. Wouldn't dare. Dropping a file later. Meet? My office, 2. At 1:30, Jenna texted a photo of a long conference table with a tray of bottled water arranged like chess pieces. The caption read, "Building a Path Forward." I stared at the photo. The room was bland on purpose. Neutral carpets, framed motivational phrases printed in grayscale so no color had to commit to anything. Andrew sat at the far end, chin lifted, the human embodiment of personal brand. My palms didn't shake. I felt only that still space my brain creates when it finds purchase. Paul arrived at 2, wearing a jacket that had retired from honorable service a decade ago. He sat, placed a file on my desk, then looked at me like he was checking for fractures. "You sure you want to read this today?" he asked. "The universe is short on tomorrows," I said. "Hand it over." He slid the file. Inside, annotations, photocopies, screen captures that would make any board member sit straighter. He pointed with a chewed pencil. Hotel, Harborview last month, booked as leadership immersion. Billed, wait for it, to a client's annual budget. Line item, strategy off-site. Attendees listed, Hale, Cross, 2 junior associates. Picture proof shows only Hale and Cross. I found a later memo claiming the juniors couldn't make it, but the client was never told. You know where this goes. Badly, I said. Conveniently, he corrected. And this is just one weekend. I found 2 more with fuzzy descriptions that happen to match the places you'd take someone when you don't want to be seen, but still want to feel seen. Privacy, with a view. I flipped through the scans. I didn't find a smoking gun. There was no need. Real scandal rarely smokes. It files forms. Paul watched me read. "Look, I don't do marital counseling," he said. "But I've seen folks blow themselves up trying to win a moment. You don't strike me as a moment guy." "I build outcomes," I said. "That's what I figured." He hesitated. I also grabbed a copy of Grayline's expense policy. You're going to love Section 8. I skimmed to Section 8 and did, in fact, love it. Reimbursements must be accurate, tied directly to client deliverables, and free of personal benefits that could create a conflict. There it was, the rule written by a committee that would shrug until someone held it under bright light. I tapped the page. "This is a hinge," I said. Paul stood, stretching his back. "Hinges swing both ways. You flip this, and you're in. But once you're in, you have to see it through. No halfway. You ready for that?" I pictured Jenna's smile, practiced in the mirror, and Andrew's public grin that never reached his eyes. I pictured our shared photos lined up on the mantel like exhibits from a simpler case. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." He nodded. "Then I'll keep feeding you paper. You'll know what to do." After he left, I closed my eyes and listened to the house. Footsteps in the hallway upstairs, mine, from memory. The heater's faint exhale. A neighbor's dog barking at a squirrel like the squirrel owed him money. I placed the file beside my keyboard and started a document labeled with a boring name, something a curious person would skip. Inside, I wrote my summary like I'd write a memo to a judge who hates adjectives. Instances of mischaracterized travel presented as client work. Evidence of dual occupancy inconsistent with listed attendees. Patterns of description designed to suggest team events without names. Overlap with private messages indicating familiarity beyond professional scope. It read clean, straightforward, and ruthless in the way truth can be when it stops apologizing. I stored files, backed them up, and stared at the word patterns until it felt like I could smell it. Patterns have a scent. They smell like someone thinking they'll never be caught. By 4, Jenna texted, "Running late. Don't wait on me." I wrote back, "Take your time. Invite Andrew to your birthday next week." 3 dots appeared, vanished, returned. Then, why? Because I want to meet the man who calls at night. A long pause then. "You're being strange." "I'm being practical." No reply. When she came home after 9, she was glossy with corporate energy, the kind you get from fluorescent lights and mutual affirmation. She put her bag on the bench, kicked off her heels, and looked around as if gauging the temperature of our home. "You cooked?" she asked hopefully. "Leftovers," I said. "How was the round table?" "Productive." She watched me, then added too quickly, "Andrew says I'm the spine of the presentation." "He would know about posture," I said. She almost smiled at that. Then she blinked. "What's this about inviting him to my birthday?" "I insist," I said, pouring water into a glass. "Invite your boss, and I'm done." "Done with what?" "With awkward introductions," I said. "I want to see the genius under pressure in his natural habitat." She stared at me, trying to decode the layers. I gave her nothing. Lawyers learn how to hold a straight face until gravity eats it. "That's weird," she said finally. "Most of life is," I said. "We make do." She collected her bag and went upstairs. The moment she rounded the corner, I stepped outside onto the back porch. Late spring air. The yard lights flicked on and painted the grass an artificial green. I exhaled the day and reached for my phone. Elliot, my old mentor, answered on the second ring. I hadn't called him in months. We'd settled into that comfortable distance men adopt when they respect each other and don't want to ruin it by talking too much. "Daniel," he said, "you sound like you're standing at a cliff but pretending it's a curb." "I always admired your imagery," I said. "You didn't call for compliments. Talk." I told him just enough. Policy infractions, questionable expenses, a boss who treated rules like furniture you slide out of the way. I didn't mention Jenna. He's not stupid. He heard the outline and sketched the rest. "You know the playbook," he said. "Documentation, neutral tone, facts that walk on their own feet. You need a clean trigger." "I have one," I said. "A party." "Even better," he said. "Public settings reveal real alliances. Smile with your eyes, not your mouth." "You make it sound like theater." "Everything is," he said. "The trick is remembering where the script ends." After we hung up, I stood there in the dark, listening to the distant rhythm of the city. The porch light drew moths that flung themselves at the bulb in hopeful loops. Every creature wants warmth. Some pick the wrong lamp. I went back in, shut off the downstairs lights, and climbed the steps. In the bedroom, Jenna lay on her side, scrollers glow across her cheekbones. She looked up when I walked in, eyes steady. "Are you mad at me?" she asked, casual tone draped over something that didn't feel casual. "Not at all," I said, brushing my teeth in the bathroom doorway. "Why should I be?" "Your texts sounded pointed." "My texts are punctual," I said. "We're different in that way." She rolled over without replying. I finished brushing, set my phone on the nightstand, and watched the digital clock blink its way toward sleep for a house that didn't deserve it. In the morning, she was chipper. That's Jenna's favorite trick: convert tension into animation and pretend it was cardio. She wore a navy blazer and a smile that could sell hydration to a fish. Her glance skimmed over me like I was the fine print on a form she'd already signed. "You sure about inviting Andrew?" she said while fixing an earring. "Completely," I said. "He's important to you. I'd like him to be important to me, at least for a few hours." "You're making a joke." "Yes," I said. "Sometimes I do that." She narrowed her eyes. I held the look a heartbeat too long. She flicked her gaze away first. Score 1 for sustained eye contact. After she left, I sent calendar holds to myself labeled with numbers only I understood. Each number represented a threshold, a time to send an email, an hour to confirm a detail Paul had flagged, a moment I would choose a tone of voice and commit to it. People think revenge is a surge. It isn't. It's a schedule. By lunch, Paul had added to the folder a neat list of Jenna's reimbursements that read like a travel blog written by someone who loved room service more than views. I highlighted 3 events: Client Immersion Weekend, Leadership Focus Day, and Regional Strategy Sync. The names tasted like air, but cost real money. Each had a matching credit charge at a place where couples pose for photos on balcony rails and call it memory. I drafted a memo addressed not to Andrew, not to Jenna, but to Gray Line's board counsel, a woman named Claire who once thanked me for a case outline by sending a card that looked like it had a sense of humor. I wrote facts and nothing else. No adjectives, no pointed phrases, no moralizing. A good memo should feel like gravity. You read it and feel the pull. You don't need a sermon to tell you which way is down. Before sending, I closed the document and stood up. I walked the block, bought a coffee, listened to a teenager curse at a vending machine, watched a couple argue gently about whether to buy a rug that could hide stains. Ordinary life calibrates you. It also reminds you what you're fighting for: space, sanity, the right to not be made a fool. Back at my desk, I reopened the memo and reread everything as if I were the opposition. Where would I attack? What parts were soft? What ambiguity could be inflated into a defense? I tweaked 2 lines, inserted receipts as exhibits, and created a separate packet that anyone could hand to a regulator without needing to edit for tone. I saved them in 2 places and printed a physical copy for the safe because paper still has a way of lasting longer than drives. At 5, Jenna texted, "Birthday menu, thoughts on a seafood spread?" "Perfect," I replied. "Make sure Andrew's invited. Label him your most important guest." A longer pause this time. "That's excessive." "He's important. Own it," I typed. I could feel the electricity of her irritation even through the little gray text bubble that never quite became a response. An hour later, she sent a screenshot of the guest list. Andrew's name sat at the top, bold, annotated with VIP. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Confidence is a nice suit. It wears thin. That night, we ate on the couch, while a cooking show scrolled through recipes. Wealthy people pretend they make it home. She curled her legs under herself, balancing a plate on her knee. "So," she said, casual as weather, "Claire reached out today." "Board counsel Claire?" I asked, innocent. "Yeah. She asked about travel controls and narrative accuracy and billing." Her words. Jenna stabbed a piece of salmon with more force than the fish deserved. "Sound like anyone you know?" "Lots of people wonder about accuracy," I said. "It's a fun trend." She studied me like a portrait that might blink. "Did you talk to anyone at Gray Line?" "I talked to so many people," I said. "Clients, colleagues, neighbors with very strong opinions about leaf blowers." "That's not a no." "It's not a yes," I said. "Ambiguity keeps conversations lively." She laughed once, but it didn't reach anything. "You're messing with me." "I haven't touched a thing," I said, "except this plate." She put her dish in the sink with a little more noise than necessary, then wiped the counter like it owed her money. I watched her move through our kitchen, efficient and beautiful and distant. I knew the man who had her attention at work. I understood his tactics. Charisma plus access plus praised stamina. Throw in late nights, shared pressure, the addictive glow of being essential. It's an old recipe. It just tastes new to whoever's eating it for the first time. She went to bed early. I stayed up, reviewing my plan for the party. It needed to be simple and precise. No theatrics, just timing. Gray Line's rules would do most of the work. I would simply open the door and let them stroll in. The day before her birthday, I cleaned the house with the quiet focus of a man polishing a stage. I arranged chairs, set out glassware, lined up serving dishes. Our dining room began to look like a catalog photo of contentment. You could put it in a magazine titled Stable Lives, and people would fold the corner of the page for later. At noon, a delivery truck brought floral arrangements. Jenna had chosen pale tones that whispered expensive. I signed for them, set them out, and sent a picture to her with a thumbs up. She replied with a heart and a note. Andrew says he'll be here right at 7. He has a hard out at 8:30. Of course he does, I said to the empty room. Executives love hard outs. They sound like control. They're really just pre-scheduled exits. At 3, I printed place cards for the table. I put Andrew at the end opposite me, the angle that forces eye contact without conversation. I slotted Jenna between us. 2 junior colleagues shared one side. Our friends, well, my former friends, if we're being honest, took the other. Tessa, her influencer cousin, texted to confirm her outfit would match the vibe. I did not ask what the vibe was. I suspected I was about to find out. 5 o'clock crept up like a verdict. I showered, dressed, and stood before the mirror tying a simple navy tie. I looked like the man I used to be when I still believed appearances had more power than documents. Then I slipped a small flash drive into my jacket pocket and a printed packet into the locked drawer in the study. At 6:40, people began to arrive, carrying wine and smiles and anecdotes prepped for group consumption. The house filled with perfume and talk and the rumble of overlapping laughter. I performed the host role with ease. I'm good with roles. You learn them in court, in meetings, in marriages. At 7, the doorbell rang with the punctual weight of a name that always expects to be let in. I opened it to find Andrew wearing that expensive, casual look. Blazer, open collar, shoes that whispered money without shouting. He held a box with ribbon like he'd stolen it from a commercial. "Daniel," he said, grin on full brightness. "Thanks for having me." "My wife insisted," I said. Jenna breezed in, kissed his cheek, and took the box like it contained oxygen. "You made it," she said. "Everyone, this is Andrew. He's my most important guest tonight." She laughed at her own line, hoping others would. They did, because groups love cues. He nodded to the room, basked, and handed me a palm squeeze that implied we were equals, as long as I understood what that meant in his language. I ushered him inside. Dinner moved with the rhythm of a well-rehearsed scene. Toasts, light jokes, self-deprecation polished to a shine, strategic compliments. I watched Jenna watching him, and him watching the room watch him. If attention were currency, this was a wire transfer. At 8:30, he stood to go. Perfect timing. He thanked Jenna for carrying the team on her shoulders, thanked me for a gracious night, and offered a vague promise of a couple's dinner some weekend soon. He left us with the scent of expensive cologne and an afterglow of clout. Guests lingered. Jenna floated. I bided time. At 9, while Tessa filmed a slow pan of the dessert display for her followers, I slipped upstairs under the cover of refilling ice. In the study, I opened my laptop. The memo to Claire sat ready with the exhibits attached. I added a short cover note. Per our conversation, please see the supporting documentation related to travel and billing narratives. As discussed, this is shared in good faith and without malice, for the integrity of company controls. Then I hit send to Claire and blind copied a generic compliance mailbox that I knew forwarded copies to a secure archive. It's nice when infrastructure helps you. I closed the laptop, pocketed the flash drive, and returned to the party carrying a bowl of ice that felt suddenly theatrical. Jenna gave me a warm smile that didn't land. I topped off glasses. People laughed at a joke I didn't catch. It didn't matter. The thing was done. At 10, the last guest hugged Jenna, told her she didn't look a day over 35, and asked for the florist's name like it would solve any of their problems. The door closed. The house sighed. Jenna leaned against the wall, eyes bright, cheeks flushed. "You were perfect," she said. "I kept waiting for you to make a pointed comment, but you didn't." "Self-control," I said. "It's an underrated virtue." She reached for me, but I stepped past her to collect glasses. It was gentle, almost tender, the way you sidestep a child dancing in a kitchen so you don't break anything. She watched me, puzzled. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I said. "Everything is exactly where it should be." She didn't believe me. Smart. She slid out of her shoes, walked barefoot into the kitchen, and hugged me from behind. "Thank you," she whispered. "Tonight mattered." "It did," I said, and set the last glass on the counter with care. I went to bed early. Somewhere around midnight, I woke to the sound of Jenna in the bathroom, humming to herself like someone who had just won a small game. I smiled into the pillow. Tomorrow, we would see who had won what. And at 8:05 the next morning, my phone vibrated with a message from Claire that contained only 2 words. Received. Understood. The next day began like a scene that didn't yet know it was part of a thriller. Morning light spilled through the blinds, ordinary and calm. Jenna was humming in the kitchen, stirring sugar into her coffee. The world outside seemed unbothered by the storm waiting in her inbox. She was scrolling through messages when I walked in. "Big day?" I asked. She looked up, a little too bright. "Andrew moved up the presentation to Friday. He's nervous after last night's party." She paused. "Did you say anything to him?" "Just, good evening, nice shoes, and hope your exit strategy's airtight." "Why?" Her eyes narrowed. "You're joking, right?" "Mostly." She forced a small laugh, but it fell flat. "You're weird lately." "Lately," I repeated, as if the word itself was under cross-examination. "You're assuming there was a normal baseline." Her smile wavered. She reached for her bag. "Don't wait up. Long day ahead." "Wouldn't dream of it." The door closed behind her, and I leaned on the counter, watching the clock tick toward inevitability. Claire would have received the memo overnight. Compliance would review it by noon. By the time Jenna walked into her office, there'd already be whispers she couldn't place. Corporate rumor mills don't roar, they hum, polite, professional, efficient. I spent the morning at my firm pretending to read a merger agreement, while my phone buzzed with tiny tremors from Paul's updates. 9:42 a.m. Heard from contact at Gray Line. Inquiry opened. 10:15. Internal comms about expense audit. Hale not happy. 10:47. Jenna's name mentioned in meeting. Guess who's on the list? Perfect, I murmured, sipping coffee that had long gone cold. By noon, Paul called. "You're a magician," he said. "The board's in emergency session." Hale looked like a man trying to explain a hole in the boat while still claiming it's part of the design. "Keep me posted," I said. "I'll be in court." Figuratively. At 2, I got an email from Claire, short and precise as a knife. "Appreciate your discretion. The board has initiated internal review. We'll update you off record. Off record. 2 words that mean the real game has begun." By the time Jenna came home that night, her energy was wrong. She dropped her purse too hard, kicked off her shoes like they'd betrayed her feet. "You won't believe my day," she said, collapsing onto the couch. "Andrew's been impossible. There's an inquiry into some billing nonsense, and he's losing his mind." "Billing nonsense," I repeated. "That's a new one." "It's ridiculous. Someone's stirring trouble." "Strange world," I said. "Trouble just appears sometimes." She frowned. "You sound like you know something." I read the news. "There's nothing in the news." "Not yet." Her eyes flicked to me, sharp and uncertain. "Daniel, what are you implying?" "That you should have been more careful with your spreadsheets." She blinked, uncomprehending for half a second too long. "Are you saying you—" "Relax," I said smoothly. I'm saying nothing. You're saying plenty. She stood, pacing. You've been cold lately, secretive. You're trying to scare me. I wouldn't try, I said. I'm too tired for effort. She glared at me, then stormed upstairs. A door slammed. I exhaled slowly and finished my drink. The sound of her footsteps faded into something that felt almost like silence, but sharper. 2 days later, the firm invited staff to a formal dinner at the Bayview, a glass-walled restaurant perched above the harbor. It was supposed to be a celebration of team resilience, whatever that meant. Jenna begged me to go. It'll look weird if you don't, she said. Andrew will be there. Well, we wouldn't want to disappoint him, I said. The night of the dinner, I wore a gray suit, respectable, forgettable, perfect for the background. Jenna wore confidence disguised as silk. We drove in silence, her perfume filling the car with a sweetness that felt rehearsed. Inside the restaurant, the city glittered beyond the windows, pretending it wasn't full of people making terrible decisions. I saw Andrew before she did, at the bar, nursing something amber and expensive. His posture screamed damage control. When he noticed us, he smiled too widely. Daniel, Jenna, glad you made it. Wouldn't miss it, I said. I hear the lobster here bills itself as a business expense. He chuckled, forced. That's funny. I'll have to remember that one. Jenna shot me a look sharp enough to draw boundaries. Let's find our table, she said through her teeth. Dinner began with speeches and polite laughter. Andrew did his usual charm act. Compliments, self-deprecation, false humility. But the shine was off. His laugh came half a second too late, his eyes darting toward every whisper. I could practically hear the calculations happening behind them. At one point, a junior associate mentioned the audit. Andrew's smile froze. Internal review, he corrected. Nothing serious. Routine. Of course, I said, raising my glass. Everything serious starts as routine. He met my eyes across the table. Something flickered there. Recognition, maybe accusation. The tension hung between us like humidity. Jenna's hand brushed mine under the table, a silent plea. Stop, she whispered. But I wasn't moving. I just watched. After dinner, people drifted toward the bar. Andrew cornered me near the exit. Mind if we talk, man to man? Is there another way? He forced a chuckle. Listen, whatever's happening with these reports, it's getting out of hand. Someone's feeding misinformation. That so? You're a lawyer. You get it. Someone with a grudge could make things look bad. Sure, I said, if there were no receipts. He blinked. Receipts? Figures of speech, I said lightly. You'll handle it. You're good under pressure, remember? He stared at me, the mask cracking just a little. What did you do? Enjoy your evening, Andrew. I stepped past him and walked outside. The night air was cool, laced with salt from the harbor. Jenna followed moments later, heels clicking fast. What was that? She hissed. You're provoking him. I was making conversation. You're trying to destroy him. He's already doing that himself. She stared at me, stunned. You've changed. No, I said. You just never noticed who I was. That night, she didn't come to bed. I heard her in the guest room, the sound of drawers opening, quiet sobs she tried to swallow. I didn't move. Sympathy is a luxury for honest people. By morning, the first article appeared online. Anonymous source, internal review, phrases like potential misuse of client funds. Grayline's board would meet again that afternoon. I knew because Claire had sent a 2-word update. It's unfolding. At noon, Jenna's car tore into the driveway. She stumbled inside, pale, eyes wide. Andrew's in panic mode, she said. He says someone leaked the documents. The company's in chaos. I looked up from my laptop, calm. Did he mention which documents? Her breath hitched. He said they were confidential. How would you? Because I wrote them. She froze, as if the air had turned to glass. You what? I wrote them, I repeated. Not as your husband. As an attorney. Greyline's board had a right to know. You ruined him, she stammered. You ruined me. Correction, I said softly. You did. I just added punctuation. Her expression shifted from disbelief to fury, then to something quieter, understanding, real, painful understanding. She backed away slowly, shaking her head. You can't come back from this, she whispered. I wasn't planning to. That night, I walked through the house alone. Every picture on the walls looked like someone else's life. The sofa where we'd watched movies, the kitchen where we'd practiced being fine. All of it had the stale weight of stage props after the show's final night. In my study, I opened the drawer where I kept Paul's file. The pages were creased from handling, but still precise. Clean work. I placed them back, locked the drawer, and shut off the light. Through the window, I could see Jenna's car parked outside, empty. She'd left hours ago, maybe to confront Andrew, maybe to salvage what remained of her job. It didn't matter. The dominoes were already falling. My phone buzzed once. Paul again, 10:32 p.m. Hale suspended pending investigation. Jenna on temporary leave. Press sniffing around. You good? I typed back one word. Perfect. Then I set the phone down, leaned back in my chair, and let the quiet return. For the first time in months, it felt like order. But order, I've learned, never lasts long. When you spend enough years drafting contracts, you start seeing life as a series of clauses, what's promised, what's implied, and what happens when one party violates both. That morning, I woke with that same lawyerly clarity buzzing in my head. Greyline's investigation had shifted from rumor to paperwork. Paperwork always wins. It never forgets. Jenna left early, looking composed but running on nerves. Her perfume lingered in the hallway like a closing argument that went on too long. She said she had to fix the narrative. Translation: she'd spend the day convincing the company that facts were misunderstandings and oversight was loyalty. She was good at that. Until now. The moment her car disappeared, I called Paul. Morning, counselor, he said. You enjoying the show? It's barely begun, I replied. You still have access to their internal systems? I have friends who do. What do you need? Expense summaries for the last quarter, especially travel. Anything labeled strategy retreat, client relations, or off-site initiative. Paul whistled. You know, normal people deal with betrayal by taking long walks. Long walks don't hold up in court, I said. He laughed softly. Give me a few hours. By noon, I was deep into my own version of fieldwork, sifting through the details that people overlook when they're too confident to cover their tracks. Jenna had always loved control. Color-coded calendars, neat expense reports, perfect justifications for every hotel stay. Her order was impeccable, which made it easier to see when someone else's handwriting slipped into her system. Paul delivered a drive at 3. You'll like this one, he said. Their reimbursements read like travel poetry. I loaded the files, line after line of corporate jargon, masked indulgence, and conveniently vague project codes. One entry caught my eye. Client Expansion Workshop, Lakeford Resort, authorized by A. Hale, coordinator J. Cross. Lakeford, I muttered. A lakeside property an hour from the city, quiet, discreet, and popular for executive bonding. Paul leaned on the doorframe. That's the one with the infinity pool and wine tastings, right? Apparently also infinite poor judgment. He smirked. You've got your proof. Proof is easy, I said. Timing is everything. By evening, the first internal memo leaked to the press. Nothing explosive, just enough to make shareholders frown. Greyline PR under review for compliance irregularities. The kind of phrase that sounds sterile until investors translate it to, we're not sure our money's safe. Jenna came home late, storm clouds in a blazer. You wouldn't believe the day, she said. Andrew's furious. He thinks someone inside the firm is feeding this nonsense. Nonsense has good sources lately, I said. She shot me a look. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Enjoyment's too emotional, I said. Let's call it professional curiosity. She paced the kitchen. He's convinced the board's out to get him. He called an emergency meeting for tomorrow. If I can just... Convince them you were merely following orders? I offered. She froze. You think this is my fault? Fault's a legal term. I prefer participation. Her shoulders stiffened. You're unbelievable. Thank you, I said. I try. She went upstairs without another word. I heard drawers open, the sound of a suitcase zipper. She was packing, just in case. I imagined her rehearsing a statement in the mirror. I didn't know. It wasn't personal. I was loyal. That word, loyal, gets thrown around by people who mistake secrecy for devotion. The next morning, I followed her, not in a trench coat, not hiding behind newspaper pages, just driving 2 cars behind through predictable routes. She went straight to Gray Line headquarters, a sleek glass box pretending to be transparent. I parked across the street, walked into the cafe opposite, and waited. At 10:12, Andrew arrived. His car, a silver coupe that screamed self-regard, rolled up to the private entrance. He stepped out, phone pressed to his ear, jaw tight. I imagined his words. Control the message, no comment to press. We're still assessing the situation. Every corporate scandal starts with those exact phrases. By noon, a flurry of texts buzzed my phone. Paul, board called in external auditors. Claire. You were right. Financial patterns align perfectly. Prepare for escalation. I smiled into my coffee. Escalation, the adult word for consequences. At 4, Jenna called. Can we talk? Her voice trembled, stretched thin by panic and forced composure. Always, I said. Andrew's losing everything. The board's suspending him pending review. They're saying... Her breath caught. They're saying I authorized false claims. Did you? She hesitated. He asked me to. He said it was covered under client development. You trusted him. He's my boss. Convenient defense, I said. Doesn't hold much water in practice. Her silence was a long, hollow pause. Then quietly, did you start this? You're assuming I'd waste time on gossip. I'm not talking about gossip. Neither am I. She exhaled sharply and hung up. That night, I opened my briefcase and looked at the folder again. Each document told the same story, one line of indulgence at a time. But something in me wasn't satisfied. Revenge by paperwork was effective, yes, but not complete. There needed to be a face to it, a confrontation to make the truth tactile. So I drove to Lakeford. The resort was half empty this time of year, off-season calm, the kind that makes secrets echo louder. I parked near the gatehouse and walked the gravel path toward the villas. Unit 7, according to Paul's file, their retreat spot. Through the glass, I could see the remnants of their illusion. A wine bottle, an empty folder, a note scribbled in Jenna's handwriting. I couldn't make out the words, but the loops of her penmanship were unmistakable. I left a small envelope wedged in the doorframe. Inside, a printed copy of the reimbursement memo with one line circled in red. Authorized by A. Hale, approved by J. Cross. No threats, no signature, just a mirror held up. Driving back, I felt something close to calm, not triumph, not rage, just balance returning to its axis. The next morning, chaos unfolded exactly on schedule. Paul's text arrived first. Hale confronted the board, walked out mid-meeting, HR escort involved. Then Claire's call. They're severing ties. Your documentation sealed it. Efficient, I said. They'll announce by afternoon? Likely. But brace yourself. Jenna's name's in the internal summary. I expected that. She's not the main target, but, well, collateral fallout's unavoidable. I almost laughed. Collateral. The word people use when precision hurts too much. When I got home that evening, Jenna was waiting in the driveway, standing beside her car with that frozen composure people wear when their world's collapsing, but they haven't found the script for it yet. "You destroyed me," she said quietly. "I revealed you," I corrected. "You could have talked to me." "I did. You lied better than you listened." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She was too proud for that. "They suspended me. Effective immediately. They said I breached ethics policy." "Harsh," I said. "Did you tell them it was client development?" She stepped closer. "You're not even sorry." "Sorry implies mistake," I said. "I make decisions." "Why?" she asked, almost whispering. "Why do this?" I studied her face, the shock, the anger, the faint trace of disbelief that I'd outplayed her in her own game. "Because you invited your boss," I said softly. "And I'm done." She turned away, hands trembling. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said, "but I'll have documentation for it." That night, I sat in my office as headlines began to roll out. Gray Line PR CEO resigns amid scandal. Internal whistleblower exposes falsified expenses. Public chaos dressed in polite language. The phone buzzed again. "Paul. She's moving out tonight." I typed back, "Let her." He sent one more. "You really planned every step, didn't you?" I stared at the message for a moment before replying, "Lawyers don't plan revenge. We execute precedent." I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and leaned back in my chair. Through the window, the city glowed steady and indifferent. Somewhere out there, Jenna was explaining herself to someone new, spinning the next story. But this time, every word she spoke would sound hollow, because the paper trail always remembers who signed where. The morning after the news broke, Boston looked deceptively peaceful. Sunlight bouncing off wet streets, people sipping coffee like the world wasn't busy rearranging itself. Gray Line's building, though, had changed overnight. You could feel it before you even stepped inside. That taut silence of professionals pretending not to gossip. I didn't have to be there. But I went anyway. Lawyers are like ghosts. We appear wherever paper burns. I had a reason to visit a client nearby, which was excuse enough to walk past the PR tower that now resembled a crime scene without yellow tape. Across the lobby, Jenna stood by the reception desk, clutching a folder, trying to look useful. Her posture was textbook corporate calm, straight back, shoulders back, controlled breathing. Only her eyes betrayed her, wide, frantic, scanning every face like they were all reading her obituary. She saw me. Our gazes locked for a fraction of a second. I smiled politely, the kind you give a stranger you might have met once at an airport lounge. Then I walked past her, never breaking pace. That moment was surgical. It said everything that needed saying. Later that day, Paul called. "You weren't kidding when you said you wanted this clean," he said. "Andrew's resigning. The board's crafting a statement to make it sound mutual." "Mutual," I said, "like a shark and a fish sharing water." "They'll release it tonight. Your wife's name is buried in paragraph 4, team oversight issues. It's survivable, but she won't be touching another corporate PR role anytime soon." "She'll try to spin it," I said. "She's already trying," Paul replied. "I heard she's calling reporters, saying she was blindsided by internal politics." "Classic," I said. "When cornered, redirect." "You're cold, man." "Precision looks like coldness to the emotional." He whistled. "You're enjoying this." "Not enjoying," I said. "Documenting." Jenna came home that evening wearing exhaustion like foundation. She set her purse down carefully as though noise might trigger another collapse. "You won," she said flatly. "Won what?" "This, whatever this game was." "I didn't know we were keeping score," I said, though we both knew I had been since the first late-night call. She leaned against the counter. "You think this makes you strong? You think humiliating me fixes what I did?" I think it balances the scales. Andrew's ruined, she said. His board froze his accounts. Reporters are outside his apartment. He blames me. Good instincts, I said. You planned this down to the last detail. Yes. Her breath caught. How could you? You mistook kindness for weakness, I said. You thought loyalty meant silence. It doesn't. It means clarity. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then walked upstairs. The sound of her footsteps faded, but the house didn't feel empty. It felt corrected. That night I sat at the desk with the blinds open. The city outside looked alive again, headlights tracing order through chaos. I poured a small bourbon and stared at the reflection of my own face in the dark window. I didn't look triumphant, just awake. My phone buzzed. Paul again. Paul. You might want to know, Andrew's condo got vandalized tonight. Nothing crazy, just spray paint on the garage, slashed tires. Guess karma's freelance now. Me. I prefer salaried retribution. Paul. You sure it wasn't you? Me. I don't leave fingerprints. He replied with a laughing emoji. I didn't, but it got me thinking. Revenge through reputation was tidy, satisfying, civilized. Still, a part of me wanted something more tangible, something he'd remember when the cameras left. 2 nights later, I took a drive. The weather had that slick shine right after rain. Andrew lived in a modern condo complex that looked expensive enough to justify its own security gate. I parked 2 blocks down, put on gloves, and walked the rest of the way. His silver coupe sat gleaming under a street lamp, the same one he'd used to pick Jenna up for late strategy sessions. The sight of it brought back every quiet dinner, every half-smile she'd given while checking her phone under the table. I didn't smash windows or slash tires, too obvious. Instead, I pulled a small tube of industrial epoxy from my pocket, a lawyer's version of a signature, and filled his driver's side lock. Quick, silent, irreversible. The next morning he'd have to call a tow truck just to get inside his own car. A minor inconvenience, a reminder. As I walked away, I couldn't help smiling. It wasn't the adrenaline people talk about. It was control, distilled and pure. The next morning, news outlets announced Andrew's personal leave of absence. His photo was everywhere, cropped, grainy, defeated. Grayline's stock dropped 3%. Social media devoured the story. At breakfast, Jenna scrolled through her phone without touching her coffee. He's blaming me publicly, she said. Says I mishandled corporate data. Did you? Of course not. That's the problem with liars, I said. They never know which truth to use when they finally need one. She stared at me, then laughed once, dry and brittle. You really are proud of this, aren't you? No, I said. Just thorough. The following weekend, she packed a suitcase. No big scene, just quiet movements, deliberate, almost ritualistic. I watched from the doorway as she folded clothes. Where will you go? I asked. Does it matter? Not to me. She zipped the suitcase and looked up. You could have left me. That would have been kinder. Kindness was the first casualty, I said. She held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. You'll be alone. I already am. She left without another word. That night, Paul called again. You sure you're done? Yes. You don't sound sure. I'm done, I repeated. But she's not. How so? She'll call him. She'll try to salvage something. Guilt's a magnet. It keeps broken people orbiting the thing that destroyed them. You're poetic for a lawyer. I read depositions, I said. They're full of poetry if you know where to look. The next day, the final blow landed. Grayline's compliance team released an official statement clearing lower employees, but emphasizing mismanagement by senior staff. Translation. Jenna was gone, Andrew disgraced, and the firm's shareholders pacified. When I showed up to sign my divorce paperwork, my attorney looked at me carefully. You seem content. Clarity feels like peace, I said, even when it isn't. That evening I received one last call from Andrew. I let it ring twice before answering. "You think you've won," he said, voice shaking with restrained fury. "I don't compete," I said. "You ruined me." "Did I? Or did you ruin yourself and just need someone to make it official?" He cursed under his breath. "You're smug, Cross. You think you're untouchable." "No," I said, smiling faintly. "Just disciplined." I hung up before he could answer. I walked outside, the air crisp and clean. Across the street, the city lights shimmered against wet pavement. I stood there a while, breathing in the quiet. Somewhere out there, Jenna was realizing that every story she'd told herself about love, loyalty, control, had collapsed under the weight of its own fiction. I wasn't happy. Happiness is temporary. This was better. It was complete. I went back inside, poured a final drink, and sat by the window. The glass reflected the faint glow of the skyline, sharp and distant. For the first time in years, I didn't check the time. I didn't need to. The clock had already struck its verdict. There's a specific quiet that fills a house before a confrontation, the kind that hums beneath the normal sounds of life. You can hear it even through music and laughter. That's the quiet I felt the night of Jenna's birthday. Every polished glass, every folded napkin, every candle she lit felt rehearsed, like props on a stage that had already burned once before. She'd spent all day decorating, curating, and pretending not to notice me watching her. The theme was simple elegance, which in our world meant expensive wine and conversation that stayed 3 inches above honesty. The guest list was the same crowd that used to fill our house when things looked perfect. Her cousins, my co-workers, a few of her ex-friends from the PR firm who still believed charm could outshine reputation. And of course, Andrew, the most important guest, as she'd labeled him in her digital invitation. The man she'd risked everything for, the man whose fall was still making headlines. At 7, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find him standing there like a ghost who hadn't realized he'd already been buried. The once pristine blazer was wrinkled, his confidence replaced by brittle arrogance. Behind him, Jenna appeared, flushed from greeting guests in the kitchen. "Daniel," Andrew said, forcing a smile. "Thanks for having me." "I didn't," I said. "She did, but you're here now. Might as well make the most of it." He hesitated, then stepped inside. Jenna rushed to smooth things over with an airy laugh. "You two, please behave. It's my birthday, not a courtroom." I poured him a drink anyway because hospitality is just another form of theater. "Bourbon?" I asked. "Sure," he said. "Neat. Of course it is." The first hour passed in a blur of polite chatter. I moved between guests, smiling, refilling glasses, performing the role of the gracious husband. But underneath the surface, tension pulsed like a low electric current. Jenna floated from conversation to conversation with that old professional grace, laughing too loudly, moving too quickly. She kept glancing at me, reading my mood like it was a volatile stock. Andrew, meanwhile, held court near the bar. Every time he spoke, he straightened his jacket as if it still held power. I could see the subtle desperation in his eyes, the need to prove he was still relevant, still desirable, still untouchable. When dessert came out, he raised his glass. "To Jenna," he said. "The best of us, even when the world doesn't deserve her." There was polite applause. I smiled thinly. "You always did have a talent for fiction, Andrew." Jenna's eyes flashed. "Daniel." "What?" "I'm just admiring the man's creativity. It's rare to see that level of storytelling outside of a deposition." The table fell quiet. Tessa tried to giggle, but it came out like a cough. Andrew set his glass down hard. "You've had your fun," he said. "Maybe keep the legal metaphors at the office." "Oh, but this is business," I said softly. "You just don't know which part yet." Jenna stood abruptly. Excuse us, she said, forcing a smile. Daniel, help me in the kitchen. In the kitchen, she spun on me. What are you doing? Hosting, I said. You invited him, remember? You're humiliating him. Don't confuse humiliation with exposure. Stop it, she hissed. Whatever you're planning, don't. You've done enough. I leaned against the counter. You know what's funny? You said that exact line 3 months ago when you came home late from a strategy session. The symmetry's impressive. Her face tightened. You can't keep punishing me for this. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm documenting the aftermath. The front door suddenly burst open, cutting off whatever she was about to say. A voice, loud and panicked, echoed through the hallway. Jenna. It was Andrew. He stumbled into the kitchen, his face pale, phone in hand. They're calling from the board, he said, breathless. The company's in chaos. His lawyer just called. What did you do? Jenna froze. What are you talking about? They're reopening the audit, he shouted. They found new files, copies of the old ones, plus internal emails. Someone just leaked everything. I looked at him calmly. Interesting timing. Maybe they finally decided to tell the truth. He turned to me, realization dawning in his eyes. You? I raised my glass. Who else? Jenna's face went white. Daniel, what did you do? Nothing illegal, I said. Just gave the right people the right documents at the right time. Think of it as a public service. Andrew lunged a step forward, fists tightening, but I didn't move. You're finished, he spat. I was finished the day you called my wife after midnight, I said quietly. Now I'm just thorough. He took another step, and for a moment I thought he might actually swing. Instead, he slammed his phone onto the counter, cracking the screen. You'll regret this, he muttered. I doubt it, I said. But thank you for attending. You've been an excellent guest. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The guests, frozen in the living room, whispered in uneasy tones. Jenna just stood there, her hands shaking. Daniel, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. You destroyed everything. I corrected it. You don't even look sorry. I told you once, I said. Invite your boss, and I'm done. You just didn't believe me. Her breath trembled. I loved you. No, I said. You loved being admired. It's not the same thing. She blinked, tears finally gathering, but I didn't move toward her. I'd already given her every chance for honesty. She'd traded them all for charm. The guests began slipping out one by one. Awkward smiles, muttered excuses, polite exits. Soon, it was just the two of us in the dim, flickering light of half-melted candles. Jenna wiped her face, turned, and whispered, What happens now? Now, I said. Now you live with it. That's the real punishment. Not the loss, not the job, not him. Just the silence afterward. The moment you realize the narrative's finally out of your hands. She sank into a chair. You can't end it like this. I can, I said, and I will. I walked to the front door, paused, and looked back once. Happy birthday, Jenna. Then I stepped outside. The night air was sharp and clean, cutting through the noise still ringing in my head. I stood by the driveway, looking at Andrew's luxury coupe parked along the curb, headlights reflecting faintly under the streetlight. I reached into my pocket and ran my fingers over the small car key I'd lifted from his jacket pocket when he'd stormed into the kitchen. Lawyers learn misdirection. It's part of the trade. I pressed the button. The car chirped obediently. I walked over, opened the driver's door, and pulled a small packet from my coat. A fine powder I'd borrowed from a friend in environmental law. Nothing harmful, just a subtle polymer dust that would gum up the ventilation system and leave a smell that wouldn't wash out for months. A harmless, precise inconvenience, enough to sting his pride every morning. I closed the door gently, placed the keys on the windshield, and walked away. Back inside, The house was silent. No more laughter, no clinking glasses, no pretense of normalcy. Jenna's figure was faint through the kitchen window, sitting motionless, staring at nothing. I turned off the porch light, went upstairs, and changed out of my suit. My reflection in the mirror looked the same as it had yesterday, but I knew better. Something fundamental had shifted. Not broken, not healed, just realigned. For months, I'd been the quiet man in the background, watching his world rearrange itself around lies. Tonight, I'd written the ending myself. And as I lay down, listening to the hum of the city through the window, I realized something simple. Revenge doesn't restore balance, it just resets the clock. Mine had just struck midnight. I woke before sunrise, the kind of half-awake that feels like someone else is borrowing your thoughts. The house was too still. The air held that post-storm heaviness. Everything quiet, everything waiting. I walked to the kitchen barefoot. The remains of the party were everywhere. Empty glasses, wilted flowers, a few crumbs of cake still clinging to the platter. The scent of perfume and anxiety still hung in the air. Jenna wasn't there. For a brief moment, I wondered if she'd packed another suitcase and slipped out during the night. Then I saw her through the window, sitting on the porch steps in her robe, staring at the wet driveway. I poured coffee, took one mug out to her. She didn't look up. "You should get some sleep," I said. "I can't." Her voice was raw. "They called me at 5. Grayline terminated me effective immediately. They said my conduct compromised the firm's integrity." "That's an elegant phrase," I said. "I've written it myself a few times." She turned toward me. Her face was pale, hollowed out by the sudden absence of certainty. "You did this. You and your perfect timing. You wanted to ruin me." "I wanted the truth to stop hiding behind charm," I said quietly. "The truth's not kind, Jenna. It never was." She swallowed hard. "I gave that company 12 years. I built its reputation. You think I deserved this?" "Deserve?" I shrugged. "You worked for a man you thought was smarter than me. Turns out he wasn't." She laughed once, a bitter, broken sound. "You think this makes you strong, Daniel? It just makes you lonely." "I've been lonely for a long time," I said. "At least now it's honest." She stood, brushed past me, and went inside. I stayed on the steps, sipping my coffee while the sun crept over the houses. Somewhere, a delivery truck rumbled past. Life moved on, politely ignoring the wreckage. Around mid-morning, my phone buzzed. Paul. "Big day, counselor," he said. "Grayline stock dropped another 6 points. Hale's name is poison now. The board's law firm just filed for arbitration against him." "Fast work," I said. "Guess who's been subpoenaed for the internal review?" I smiled. "Don't tell me, Jenna." "Bingo. They'll grill her about authorization and documentation. She'll claim she was misled." "She's good at that," I said. "She's been practicing on me for years." "You sure you're okay?" "I'm not sure that word applies anymore," I said. "But yes, I'm functional." "That's your version of joy, huh?" "Pretty much." By noon, the city had started to buzz with the aftermath. News outlets picked apart the story like scavengers. Interviews, speculation, recycled headlines. Every hour brought a new theory. None of them mentioned me, which was exactly how I'd planned it. I walked downtown to clear my head. The air had that crisp after-rain clarity that makes everything look like it's pretending to be fresh. I passed cafe windows where people argued softly over lattes, co-workers gossiping about that PR scandal, couples planning weekends, oblivious to the wreckage under their news feeds. When I reached the parking garage, I almost didn't recognize the car at first. Andrew's silver coupe parked half sideways near the elevator, hazard lights blinking weakly. A tow truck idled beside it, and Andrew himself was there, pacing, phone pressed to his ear. I leaned against a column, half in shadow, and watched. He was dressed sharply, but the confidence was gone. He gestured wildly at the mechanic, shouting into his phone. Then he spotted me. For a second, he froze. "Cross," he said, lowering the phone. "You think this is funny?" "Define funny," I said. "My car's ruined. Locks sealed, ventilation's jammed. You think this'll scare me?" "Scare you?" I smiled faintly. "No. Inconvenience you, maybe." He stepped closer, eyes blazing. "You're insane!" "Possibly," I said. "But legally, I'm fine. You cost me everything," he said through clenched teeth. "You destroyed my company, my career, my reputation." "You did that," I said evenly. "I just filed the paperwork." For a moment, I thought he might hit me. His hand twitched, but then he stopped, looking around. Tow truck driver watching, traffic cameras blinking red lights above us. He wasn't brave enough for public consequences. Instead, he straightened his jacket and said, "You'll regret this. You can't stay clean forever." "Maybe," I said. "But you'll still be the guy with a broken car and a ruined name. Have a productive day, Andrew." I walked away, his shouts fading behind me. When I got home, the house was empty. Jenna's suitcase was gone. She'd left her wedding ring on the counter, beside a note written in her neat, symmetrical handwriting. "I don't hate you. I just can't look at what you've become." I read it twice, then folded it neatly and dropped it in the trash. I poured another coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd once laughed about office politics, where we'd made plans we never kept. The silence was almost comfortable now. By afternoon, Paul called again. "You heard the latest? Hale's firm issued a full apology. The investors are suing. The guy's toast." "I told you," I said. "Precision. People are calling it a modern corporate tragedy." "People love a spectacle," I said. "They just don't like seeing who built it." Paul hesitated. "You don't sound happy." "I'm not unhappy," I said. "That's enough." That evening, I drove aimlessly through the city, just to feel movement. The skyline gleamed like it was mocking me. Beautiful, distant, perfectly indifferent. Somewhere beneath all that light, there were 1,000 stories like mine, just quieter, not written down. I stopped by the harbor. The air smelled of salt and old wood. Seagulls screeched like unpaid interns fighting over scraps. I leaned on the railing and let the wind push against my jacket. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like arguing with the world. Then my phone buzzed again. A message from Claire. "It's done. Arbitration proceeding confirmed. Excellent work. Rest easy, Daniel." Rest easy. I stared at the words for a long time. Easy wasn't a word I recognized anymore. When I got home, the house was dark. I poured a drink, walked through each room, and turned off every remaining light. In the reflection of the window, I saw only my own outline, a man who had dismantled everything he loved and found something steadier in the ruins. I sat down, raised my glass, and said quietly to the empty room, "Case closed." Then, for the first time in months, I allowed myself to smile. But not for long, because revenge, I realized, isn't an ending. It's a cycle that keeps time with its own pulse, ticking softly in the dark. And somewhere, beyond the stillness, I could already hear the next second waiting to fall. The first week after Jenna left was quiet, in the way a courtroom feels after a verdict, emptied of emotion but still echoing with the sound of what's been decided. The house didn't feel haunted, it felt erased. Her perfume was gone, her makeup drawer cleared, her voice replaced by the soft hum of the refrigerator. People at the firm started asking gentle questions. "How's Jenna?" "You holding up?" they asked because they had to, not because they cared. Lawyers aren't built for empathy. We're trained to recognize weakness and rephrase it as a liability. I told them I was fine, and I was, just not in the way they meant. Paul stopped by that Friday. He let himself in like he always did, carrying a six-pack and that look he wears when he's trying to figure out if I'm human or a machine. "Place looks clean," he said, glancing around. "Too clean. Like a rental you forgot to personalize." I'm enjoying the silence, I said, taking a can. He popped his open, sat on the couch. Gray Line's board is collapsing. New management announced this morning. Hale's name scrubbed from every document. You burned them clean. Not burned, I said. Purified. He gave me a look. You ever listen to yourself, counselor? You sound like a guy who's halfway between genius and cautionary tale. Depends on the audience, I said. He leaned back. And the wife? Gone, I said. Left a note. You keep it? No. Cold. Efficient. He studied me for a while. You know, people like us, we tell ourselves revenge brings closure. It doesn't. It just gives you a better view of the wreckage. I took a sip of beer. Then at least the view's mine. He chuckled softly. You really are something, Daniel. Don't tell anyone, I said. Over the weekend, I decided to sell the house. It wasn't out of sadness. It was practicality. Every corner was evidence, every shadow a cross-examination of what had been, and I was done defending ghosts. I hired a real estate agent named Lindsay, efficient, cheerful, the kind of person who uses words like potential without irony. She toured the house with polite detachment, clipboard in hand. Beautiful space, she said. Great light, strong bones. You'll have no trouble selling. Perfect, I said. I'm not attached. Divorce? She asked delicately. Closure, I replied. She smiled uncertainly, probably wondering if that was a brand of trauma she hadn't listed yet. Monday came with a strange calm. The firm had settled into its new hierarchy. My phone barely rang. The scandal that had once dominated the city's news cycle was fading into the background. People had moved on. That's what they do. They consume the spectacle, then look for the next one. But not everyone had. That evening, as I was leaving the office, I saw her. Jenna. She stood outside the building, wearing a gray coat and dark glasses, holding herself like someone trying to look strong in public. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, I didn't come to fight. Good, I said. I'm out of patience for courtroom drama. I just wanted to see you, she said, to tell you I understand now. Understand what? What you did. Why you did it. You needed control again. You needed to win. I shook my head. You think this was about control? Wasn't it? It was about respect, I said. You traded it away, and you expected me to keep pretending the exchange was fair. She took a slow breath. I didn't mean to destroy us. You didn't, I said. You just gave me the motivation to rebuild differently. She flinched, then nodded. I'm moving to Chicago, she said. Starting over. Small firm, different industry. No one knows me there. Good, I said. You'll like the anonymity. She looked down, then back at me. Do you ever regret it? Regret's sentimental, I said. I don't do sentimental. She smiled sadly. I hope someday you will. Then it'll be someone else's problem, I said. She turned and walked away. No tears, no goodbyes, just the quiet shuffle of shoes on pavement, fading into traffic. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of guilt, because of stillness. Revenge, I realized, gives you something to aim at. When it's over, all that focus has nowhere to go. It just floats. I went for a drive. The city lights smeared across my windshield like restless thoughts. I passed the old Gray Line tower, now stripped of its signage. The windows were dark except for a few janitors moving like ghosts through the lobby. Then, by habit, I turned toward Andrew's neighborhood. His condo looked different. Curtains drawn, car gone, mailbox stuffed. A "for sale" sign tilted in the front yard. I parked a block away, sat there for a while, engine idling. A motion sensor light flicked on. Andrew stepped out. His suit was wrinkled, his expression hollow. He carried a box of papers to the curb, dumped it beside an overflowing bin, and stood there a moment, staring at it like he couldn't remember what any of it meant. For a brief second, Our eyes met across the distance. He saw me. Recognition flickered, followed by something else, something like surrender. He didn't shout this time, didn't move, just turned and walked back inside. I didn't follow. By dawn, I was home again. I stood in the kitchen, watching the sunlight creep across the countertop, painting everything in soft gold. The same countertop where Jenna once set her coffee, where her phone had buzzed late at night. The same stage, now empty. I realized then that revenge isn't a conclusion, it's punctuation, a hard stop at the end of a sentence you're finally done reading. The phone buzzed one last time, Paul again. They're calling you the invisible architect of this mess. Sounds poetic, I texted back. So what's next? I looked around at the stripped-down house, the faint echo of what used to be. I'm thinking of moving, I typed. Fresh start. You ever gonna tell her? He asked. Tell her what? That you still cared. I stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it. Then I picked up the realtor's papers, signed the listing agreement, and walked outside. The air was crisp, the street quiet. Somewhere down the block, a neighbor's dog barked once, sharp and clean, as if announcing something inevitable. I locked the door behind me and didn't look back. The city was waking up, and for the first time, I wasn't part of the story anymore. I was the silence after it. 2 weeks after Jenna walked out, my calendar looked like a puzzle with the corner pieces missing. Meetings halved, calls shortened, evenings quiet. I kept moving anyway, filed motions, answered emails, ate at a diner where the waitstaff knew not to ask if I wanted dessert. Function is its own form of grace. On a gray Thursday, Claire called. We're wrapping arbitration prep, she said. Hale's attorneys sent a blunt letter. They claim your exhibits were obtained through improper access. They want everything excluded. Of course they do, I said, walking past the river. When facts don't help, question the venue. We'll win the motion, she said. But there's noise about a secondary leak. Something new spooked them. Did you send anything else? No, I said. Silence stretched thin over the line. Be careful, Daniel, she said. Cornered people convince themselves they're heroes. I've noticed, I said. They call it necessity. After we hung up, I stared at the water until a jogger clipped my shoulder and muttered an apology without slowing. The city kept churning, ferries nosing across the current, office towers blinking like giant routers. I had the strange urge to laugh. The world loved rhythm. I had introduced a new beat and now everyone wanted to know who held the sticks. That afternoon, Tessa texted. I hadn't heard from her since the party, where she'd captured a slow-motion video of champagne that, for a single glittering second, made deception look cinematic. You free to talk? Depends. About Jenna, and Andrew, and you. I almost ignored it. Then curiosity nudged. She suggested a coffee shop near the waterfront, all glossy tile and plants that looked like they had publicists. I arrived early and took a table by the window. Tessa appeared minutes later, oversized sunglasses, careful hair, the fragile confidence of someone who relied on strangers' approval like oxygen. She sat, removed the glasses, and blurted, "He tried to pay me." Who did? Andrew. I didn't blink. For what? For a video, she said. He wanted me to post about you, say you were obsessed, say you hacked Jenna's files, paint you as some controlling monster. And? I refused. Then I recorded him asking. He didn't notice. She swallowed. I'm not a saint, Daniel, but even I have a line. I let the information settle. The coffee shop suddenly felt too bright. Why are you telling me now? Because he's not done, she said, leaning in. He's still reaching out to people. He's telling some of Jenna's ex-friends that he has proof you tampered with documents. He's trying to turn it back on you. He knows better, I said, but he's not thinking like a professional anymore. Tessa slid her phone across the table. On it, a clip. Andrew's voice, clear, impatient. Tie his name to stalking. Say he threatened Jenna. Say he's unstable. I'll cover your expenses. He named a number with too many zeros to be casual. He said my name twice, like he was checking if it still tasted like power to say it out loud. You kept the original file? I asked. She nodded. Cloud and card. I'm not an amateur. Surprising, I said. She rolled her eyes. I contain multitudes. Do you want anything for it? Just the right ending, she said softly. He embarrassed me at that party, treated me like furniture. I'd like him to learn that people aren't props. Agreed, I said, and stood. Don't respond to him again. If he calls, send him to voicemail. We'll use this when it matters. She touched my sleeve. Jenna didn't know he did that. She's not your friend, but she isn't him. I know the difference, I said. Differences matter. I left the cafe with my jacket buttoned and my jaw set. The river wind pressed against me like a firm hand. For months I'd promised myself I wanted balance, not theater. The clip in my pocket wanted a stage. Fine. I'd build one where the exits were numbered and the lights were bright. At 7, Claire confirmed a pre-arbitration conference for the next evening. Hotel ballroom, heavy carpet, pitchers of water that always tasted faintly of dust. Greyline's new leadership would attend. So would Andrew. The image came fast and precise. A narrow corridor, a bank of elevators, a room with sound baffling, the controlled hum of expensive conflict. I felt calm rise like a tide. This was a setting I understood. An hour later, Jenna called. I almost let it go to voicemail. Curiosity won again. Daniel, she said, I heard about tomorrow. They want me to testify. That makes sense. He called me just now, she said, voice careful. Andrew said he'll fix everything if I say you fabricated the expense emails. And you believed him? I know better, but I need you to know something. She paused. I have a copy of our messages. Not the pretty ones, the ones where he pushed. I kept them because I thought I might need them someday. I'm not proud of that. Insurance, I said. People keep umbrellas even when it's sunny. If I bring them, he'll come after me. He already did, I said. You just didn't notice the first time. She exhaled. I'll be there. Bring everything. A beat. Why are you helping me? I'm not, I said. I'm finishing what I started. Do you ever run out of precision? No, I said. That's the point. The next day moved like a chess clock. Work. A shower that felt like rinsing adrenaline off the hinges. I dressed in a dark suit whose only ambition was to blend in. I packed Tessa's clip on a fresh drive and scanned Jenna's messages, which she'd emailed just after lunch. Timestamps, instructions, a pressure that curled through the sentences like a signature scent. It was all I needed. Each line was an admission disguised as leadership. He'd overplayed. People like Andrew always did. The hotel sat over the harbor like a ship that refused to sail. Conference rooms glowed with muted lighting. The lobby smelled like citrus and brand management. I arrived early and walked the periphery, mapping routes out of habit. Elevator bank left, service corridor behind a double door, stairwell at the far end that most guests never saw. Security cameras blinked with polite indifference. Good. Documentation without theatrics. Claire met me near the registration table. She wore the smile of someone who knew exactly how much everyone in the room was paid. You look comfortable, she said. Because I am, I said. She scanned my face. Stay in control. Always. We moved toward Ballroom C. The door was open, the room already filling, consultants in dark suits trying to out-neutral each other, a court reporter arranging a machine like a small altar, Greyline's interim CEO conferring with counsel. Andrew entered 5 minutes later, pushed along by 2 attorneys whose eyes flicked over everyone like thermostats. He looked smaller, not physically, just reduced. He saw me and sneered with effort. Cross, he said near my shoulder as if we were old friends. Still pretending you're a white knight? I don't do knights, I said. Too dramatic. He leaned in, voice low. By the end of tonight, you'll wish you'd stayed in your nice quiet house. You'll wish you never met me. On that, I said, we agree. He blinked, thrown off by the symmetry, then blustered past. I watched him aim for the center of the room like a moth spotting a brighter bulb. The conference opened with introductions, ground rules, the kind of sober reminders hotels put in place of real solutions. Disputes about schedule, scope of discovery, limits on media contact. It felt like scaffolding before a storm. Near the back, Jenna stood with a slim file clutched to her chest. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. We broke for 20 minutes so counsel could align on exhibits, which meant the hallway became a low-voltage theater of whispers. That's when Andrew made his move. He approached Jenna with a smile I'd seen him use on donors and interns alike. "Let me help you," he said. "We're in this together." "No," she said, voice steady. "We never were." He reached for her elbow. She pulled back. He dropped the smile and stepped closer, words sharpening. I began moving before I knew I'd decided. Not fast, just direct. "Daniel," Jenna said when I arrived, relief flashing across her face like a match. "He wants my phone." Andrew turned, eyes hard. "Private property," he said. "Company data." "Her personal phone," I said. "Not your jurisdiction." "I have rights," he snapped. "Not here," I said. He took a half step, chest bumping mine, a performative shove meant to broadcast dominance to anyone watching. Lawyers scattered like birds. Someone said, "Gentlemen," in a tone that was more prayer than instruction. I didn't lift my hands. I didn't move. I just held his gaze and said, "One more inch, and you will regret how public this gets." "You think I'm scared of cameras?" he said louder. "No," I said. "I think you're scared of microphones." He snorted, then reached again, this time for Jenna's bag. Reflex took over. I grabbed his wrist, twisted, and pinned his hand to the wall beside the elevator. Not dramatic, just decisive. He yelped, more from surprise than pain. His shoulder thumped the metal panel, setting the elevator to chime a polite arrival. "Here's how this works," I said softly, close enough that only he would hear. "You're going to step back. You're going to keep your hands to yourself. And you're going to walk into that room and listen while people explain your future in very small words." He tried to yank free. I didn't let him. He swung his free hand up, clumsy, palm open. I caught it midair, and maybe for myself, maybe for months of midnight calls and fake retreats, and the smug way he toasted my wife at my own table, I slapped him, once, fast. The sound cracked like a snapped pencil. Everything stopped. Conversations froze mid-sentence. The elevator doors opened to an empty car, a gleaming box waiting to be helpful. Andrew staggered, stunned, touching his cheek as if something valuable had just been repossessed. He looked around for allies and found none. His lawyers had turned away in unison, studying their shoes as if they'd been asked to grade them. Security arrived in that floating way. Hotel security always arrives, present but careful, hands displayed, voices smooth. "Everything okay here?" "Perfect," I said, releasing his wrist. "Mr. Hale needs some space." Andrew straightened, eyes burning. "You assaulted me," he said too loudly. I shrugged. "You reached for property that wasn't yours. I redirected your enthusiasm." A murmur moved through the hall. He saw what I saw, cameras domed in the ceiling, red lights winking the way guilt does when it thinks no one is watching. Jenna stood behind me, phone in her hand now, expression unreadable. "Sir," one guard said to Andrew, "let's keep it professional." He laughed once without humor and backed away, smoothing his jacket with shaking hands. For the first time, I noticed a smear of something on his cuff, ink, maybe, or sauce from the reception table. Imperfection on a man who once treated himself as a brand. He looked almost human. Then he ruined it by speaking. "This isn't over," he said. "Correct," I said. "It's scheduled." We returned to the ballroom. Claire met me at the threshold, eyes flicking to my hands, then to Andrew's face, where a faint blooming mark suggested someone had interrupted his expedition. She raised one brow. I gave the smallest nod. She didn't smile exactly. Something like respect crossed her features and departed as quickly as it came. The session resumed. Counsel for Greyline introduced an exhibit I hadn't seen, a timeline of authorizations with email headers, device IDs, and IP logs. Clean, unadorned, devastating. Jenna's file came next. Messages from Andrew instructing her to consolidate narratives and align expenses with client-facing outcomes, phrases so polished they squeaked while confessing their purpose. Then Tessa's clip. They played the audio in that room full of professionals who pretended not to react to anything. You could feel the gasp without hearing it. Andrew's attorney objected, then objected to his own objection, then asked for a break. The arbitrator, a woman with silver hair and a stare that could sort steel, denied it. "We can settle this tonight," she said calmly, "or we can make it very long and very public tomorrow." Heads bowed, papers shuffled. Andrew whispered into his counsel's ear with the intensity of a person praying at a slot machine. His team huddled, recalculated, melted. Finally, they proposed an offer. Resignation with prejudice, restitution, restrictions on future executive roles, an apology drafted with phrases that could almost pass for sincerity. Claire's face didn't move, but I saw the victory in her posture. Weight transferred to the front foot, shoulders aligned, breath measured. The arbitrator looked around the table. "Counsel?" "Acceptable," Claire said. "Not enough," I said softly. Heads turned. Claire shot me a glance that said, "Careful." I met Andrew's eyes. "One more term," I said. He retracts every statement about Jenna that suggests she acted alone. He admits pressure, not to absolve her, just to tell the true story. Jenna's head snapped toward me. The room waited. Andrew's mouth worked, then went still. "Fine," he said through his teeth. "On video," I added. His lawyer began to sputter. He hushed him with a look I recognized from our first dinner together, the one he once used to control a room. It didn't work anymore. "Fine," he repeated softer. They arranged the lights. The court reporter set a small camera on a tripod like a low altar to accountability. Andrew sat before it and read from the agreed text, voice level, hands steady, because they had to be. He acknowledged errors. He acknowledged pressure. He acknowledged Jenna as a participant under influence. No redemption, no rewrites, just sentences that finally stood upright. When he finished, he stared at the lens another second, as if asking it to blink. It didn't. The camera's red light became a period at the end of a long, messy paragraph. We signed. The arbitrator adjourned. People started gathering their papers, their briefcases, their scattered dignity. I felt that old stillness again, the one that arrives right as the verdict lands. Not triumph, not joy, just the low hum of balance being restored by boring means. Out in the hall, Andrew waited near the elevators, alone. I approached with measured steps. He watched me, jaw tight. "You think this ends me," he said. "But men like me?" "Always think the mirror is a window," I said. "One day you'll learn the difference." He laughed once, harsh, then pressed the call button. The elevator opened immediately, a polished box greeting a man who had mistaken momentum for destiny. He stepped in and turned, ready to deliver a final line. I beat him to it. "Enjoy the ride," I said. The doors slid shut between us with a soft sigh. Behind me, Jenna stood with her file pressed to her side. Her face was complicated, relief braided with loss, something like respect threaded through it all. She started to speak. I held up a hand. "No," I said gently. "This is where it ends." She nodded. just once. "Thank you," she whispered. It wasn't forgiveness. It was recognition. We walked toward the exit. The corridor was long and quiet, carpet swallowing footsteps, air cool on my face like the first honest breath after a long argument. Outside, the harbor wind rushed at us, alive and indifferent. Sirens sounded somewhere deep in the city, part of the world's ongoing chorus. Taxis slid past. A valet jogged with keys raised like trophies. A storm front was gathering over the water, flat and dark, the kind that turns the skyline into a promise. Claire caught up, shook my hand, and disappeared into the lobby glow. Jenna turned left toward the street. I turned right toward the garage. Halfway down the ramp, I heard a shout, echoing footsteps. Andrew again, running, tie askew, eyes wild with last-minute courage that only appears when the audience has started to leave. "You don't get the last word," he yelled. I kept walking. "Check the transcript," I said over my shoulder. He lunged. His shoe slipped on the painted concrete. For a breath, the world tilted toward chaos. I pivoted, caught the lapel of his jacket, and redirected him against the hood of a parked sedan. He wheezed, shocked. The impact set off a polite chirp from the car's alarm, like applause from a small crowd that had stayed late. "Listen carefully," I said, voice low. "This is the end. You will walk away. You will keep walking. If you turn around, you'll find the rest of your life is a hallway you can't exit. Don't test that hypothesis." He stared up at me, breathing hard, pride collapsing by degrees. Somewhere above us, the hotel's revolving door whooshed, a sound like a page turning. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Every part of him already knew the line had been crossed and the play was over. I released him and stepped back. He straightened, smoothed his jacket with shaking hands, and took one step, then another, back toward the elevator. He didn't look at me again. I turned, walked to my car, and slid behind the wheel. The engine caught with a smooth purr. I rested my hands on the steering wheel and watched the exit lane ahead, clean, direct, empty. For a heartbeat, I thought about all the versions of me that had existed in the past year. The husband who wanted to be fooled, the lawyer who took notes even when his life was the case, the man who learned that justice, when properly assembled, sounds like a door closing. I shifted into drive. The garage ramp stretched out, a bright stripe leading to the street. I touched the gas, felt the car glide forward, and smiled once without an audience. Then I accelerated into the night, the city opening in front of me like a file I finally understood, and the story ended on motion. Not promise, not apology, just the clean, irreversible surge of a decision fully made.